This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman
and Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
We are back for a special spooky season episode of Art of Darkness, the podcast about the dark side of creativity. We're covering one of the darkest, or darker at least, ones of these. Kevin, how are you?
Never better. It's almost Halloween.
Yeah,
I'm a Halloween respecter.
Yeah, you got a costume lined up?
You know, I don't, but I have children. And it's really all about the kids. It's all about the trunk or treats. And I'm taking my older daughter to see Tool on Halloween.
Ooh.
So that is going to be a bucket list type thing.
Yeah,
she turned 15. She became a metalhead on her own, and Dad gets to take her to see Tool on Halloween.
Yeah.
So here we are. That's going to be a lot of fun. She's going as Ellie from The Last of Us, which I respect.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had to buy her costume, and I said, "Do you need a machete? Do you need a shotgun?" No.
No. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know The Last of Us. Isn't Ellie just like a girl in a normal outfit?
Yes. But there are special little artifacts. She's like, but you can. There are identifiable things. That is really funny because one of the items on her list was like a $70 backpack on Amazon, and I'm like, do you need this specific backpack to realize this? Because, sweetie, honey, I will get you a $70 backpack. But we're going to shop around for that. We're going to. I'd like that to be like. What if the apocalypse happens? In this economy, it could happen. And I actually would like to go to the military surplus, the army surplus store, and get you the apocalypse survival backpack for $70.
Sounds good. Yeah.
You're going as a podcaster again, aren't you?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. No, I hand out the treats. Maybe I'll put on. I tend to have. I've some years in the past. My wife is a very talented face painter. It's not really what she does or anything, but she just has this skill. So I've had her do me up before. A good one to do, I've done a couple times because I got this big bald dome. Is you just doing two very realistic looking eyes on your forehead. It's a very unsettling effect. Yeah. So we might do that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Very good. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And have you already said who we're doing today?
I haven't actually said. No, we're covering, and if you clicked play, you probably know, but we're covering Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I am excited. This is big air.
Yeah.
I can't wait. What do you have lined up for us, Brad?
Oh boy. Well, like we always do on Out of Darkness, we're gonna tell the whole story. We're gonna dip into, not every bit of work that he wrote, but some of the key stuff, some of the classics that people are generally familiar with, and then some of the stuff that maybe you weren't quite aware that he wrote. I think I'm not sure about you, Kevin, but my introduction to Edgar Allan Poe came in two forms when I was a young buck. It came through the Treehouse of Horror on the Simpsons Halloween special when they did an adaptation of The Raven, and it came through reading 3 or 4 of these stories in class in high school. That's how I got introduced to Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know do you remember how Poe came into your cognizance?
I think I acquired Poe cognizance, Poe consciousness, the same way that every American lad or lassie of our generation did, through popular media.
Yeah.
And not just The Simpsons. I think probably every single cartoon we watched did a little weird Poe ripoff. Like Looney Tunes would even, I imagine, maybe they have the Nevermore, the Raven. Right. I mean, it's part of the folklore. It's like a level of folklore, Poe. And then, of course, in high school, you're subjected to the Telltale Heart and maybe The Fall of the House of Usher, and a few other stories. I was never gaga for Poe. I never thought, I'm going to seek these out and read more of these. But that may have just been because of the time in my life I was exposed to it. It was certainly a case of when we were made to read them in high school, feeling this isn't that much of a chore, but also I don't get it.
Sure. And I think if you're not already on the Poe train, I think during this episode, even if you don't necessarily fall in love with the particular story we talk about, I think what I want to convey to people in this episode is he is arguably the most important, depending on what you mean by important, American writers in American literary history. And he was some kind of mad genius. I mean, the things that he wrote to us, because they've been adapted, because they've been reconfigured and parts of them have been put in, The Simpsons, Looney Tunes and whatever, you kind of forget that, this guy came up with this stuff on his own, and he has like 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 narrative tropes that he basically invented that are continuously used. So that's the kind of, I want to get that impression to you. I also want to convey the fact
go ahead. Do we need to start with the opening question?
Well, we do need to get further. Let's do this. Let's do this. Kevin. Oh, by the way, I'm Brad Kelly at Brad Kelly on Twitter. This is Kevin Kautzman at Kautzmania on Twitter. Hit us up. Follow Art of Dark Pod at Art of Dark Pod as well. But the opening question, which we always do or try to, Kevin, what do you know about Edgar Allan Poe?
All right. So I know what I've already said in terms of my own exposure and kind of the way that Poe exists in the American psyche at a level of like a folkloric level. I know he is associated with Baltimore, heavily. And much beyond that, are we talking about the 1880s?
Earlier,
1840s?
It's earlier than I thought. Yeah, he dies in 1849.
1849. Okay, all right. So yeah, clearly I'm wildly off the mark.
I was too.
Before the Civil War. Yeah.
Yeah, when I started this, I assumed that he was like alive during the Civil War, and that's not true at all. So,
okay, yeah, that's fascinating to me. One thing about Art of Darkness, we don't always pose as the absolute experts at everything.
Right.
Get things wildly wrong. Like, for example, Kevin 40 years off of the Poe timeline. But that's part of the fun of the show. That's the franchise of this show. Yep.
And I think in this case, it actually tells us something, because when we think about the stories and what he was doing, we cheat him forward in history a little bit. And we're going to see why that is.
I can imagine why, because of the outsized influence. I know that Wallach wrote. Did Wallach write a book on Lovecraft? No, Wallach wrote a book on Lovecraft. Yeah.
He wrote a book on Lovecraft. He may have written something about Poe. Poe was hugely important to the French symbolists, and Baudelaire is like the 19th century Wallach. So yeah.
Okay, well that was what I was going to say. Is I think that he has, like, among the French, he has an outsized reputation. You're right. Beyond that, I really don't know much about Edgar Allan Poe, so I'm excited to learn along with our audience.
Yeah. No, this is going to be a good one, I think. And one thing, he's a perfect subject for this show. I mean, the promise of the show is we're trying to understand what is creativity? Why do creative people so often have troubled lives? What is it about the relationship? Is there any relationship? And in Poe, I think we're going to see not only a very troubled man, a very talented man, a very influential man, but we're also going to see the fact that these things are they're not separate. They're not isolated from each other. He is the forerunner of the troubled writer cliche. I mean, before Poe, there weren't a whole lot of like down and out alcoholic writers that you would know about. They're just not that many of them, for whatever reason. And I think that's interesting. There's a way in which he not only influenced in several different genres and subgenres, as we're going to see, but he also changed our impression of what a writer is as a figure, for good or ill, So
I also, one last thing I maybe know about him is I feel like he was unlucky in love. I don't know that his
yes, we're gonna get to that. Right. We're gonna actually in the After Dark for Patreon supporters at patreon.com/ArtofDarkPod, where we do our After Dark episodes for our beloved patrons. One of the things we're going to talk about is the time that I don't know if you would call it quite a love affair, where Poe's relationship with women not only got him in trouble, but basically got him booted out of the New York literati. So we're gonna tell that story.
I'd like to imagine that Poe was the literary it girl of his time.
He actually was for about 6 months in 1845.
That's
the belle of the ball.
As long as anybody can stand to be the belle of the ball, and
right.
It coincides with how long everybody else can stand it.
It's right.
Very, very thin window there. I am excited. That's going to be fun. Yeah. Don't sleep on the Patreon. Every episode, bonus content, After Dark. Brad's going to talk about some extra juicy stuff.
Since we're saying the After Dark, another thing we always have at least one thing we're going to talk about, but another thing we're going to talk about is Poe's weirdest, most prescient story that, unless you're a total Poe head, you have probably never heard of. So we'll talk about that as well.
Total Poe boy.
Poe boy. Yeah, unless you're a Poe boy, you probably don't know anything about this story. Yeah.
I mean, so we usually do housekeeping at this point. We will not belabor it. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. You get the bonus After Dark. You get access to the book club. Aaron Gwynn is going to be joining us for the Blood Meridian Patreon book club special. That's coming up fast. It's almost November. That's going to be in December. Yep. Don't sleep on that. He's also going to come and join us for a very special Beckett Darkroom. So I'm excited for that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
One last time, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. We also have a Telegram channel. That's fun. People like getting in there. You listen to this episode about Poe. You're not sure. You want to be a real Poe boy. You got to get into the Telegram. t.me/artofdarkpod. We have a nice little community there. You could about imagine what a chat room full of 150, 160 Art of Darkness listeners sounds like. If that sounds like fun to you, get in there. What else? Twitter at Art of Dark Pod, and we're also on YouTube. Which is fun. I think people are used to our faces by now, Brad.
Yeah.
So maybe the worst is behind us.
At first everybody was like, "You don't look like how I imagined you," and it was like, "Well, sorry, I guess. I don't know.
It's always a weird thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's always an odd thing.
Do I look better or worse? Like,
yeah. Well, and I just, before we get into the episode proper, let me just say too, we appreciate all of our listeners. We really, really, really appreciate getting feedback. We appreciate hearing from you in the Telegram, hearing from you in the Patreon chat room. We have an email, artofdarkpod@gmail.com. You want to suggest a subject, you have thoughts that maybe you want to share with us, you have some ideas, we get something wrong, we want to hear about it. And we say in the intro, we're very online.
If we get a factual thing wrong, I would like to hear that. That's always interesting to me, because we do our darndest. Sometimes you can get something, honestly, I've come across this in a biography that's wrong. You'll read a biography and then read someplace else, and like, these two don't line up. I'm not sure which of these is right. So and then other times you just make mistakes. So it is good to hear that kind of thing, for sure.
All right.
Quick thing on sources. My primary source is Poe, His Life and Legacy by Jeffrey Myers. Jeffrey Myers also wrote the Joseph Conrad biography that I use. So he's a great biographer, and this is a good read if you want to dive deeper. This is probably a great place to start on the life and legacy of Edgar Allan Poe. Other sources I'll read as I come to it. I think to kind of launch into it, I'm going to read, and I'm going to try to make the argument. I made a pretty bold claim early that Poe is maybe the most important American writer. If you if importance is about influence, I think there's a strong argument here that Poe among the Americans is as important as anybody else. And I'm going to try to make that argument.
Melville. Who else?
Hemingway.
Hawthorne? Hemingway now.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But we're in thin air up there.
Yeah.
It's very rarefied air.
A handful. And that, I'm not, I guess more than anything, I'm saying he's in the running. I don't really like most, best, that kind of thing necessarily, but he's certainly, you can't understand American literature if you don't have some sense of who this guy was. So let me read a little bit from this biography, this great Jeffrey Myers biography, and just this will help us get a sense. Quote, "This celebrated delinquent became the saddest and strangest figure in American literature. Socially dislocated, emotionally starved, and torn in spirit, he kept no diaries, had no intimate friends, and confided in no one. Poe's strange, melancholy loneliness, his obsession with plagiarism, his sensitivity to criticism, his frequent requests for money, his threats of rash behavior, his overweening pride, his humiliating self-abasement, and his compulsive self-destruction all contributed to his caustic and corrosive character. Yet his sense of social grievance, his brooding temperament, his fecklessness, his excitable, imperious nature were balanced by his Castilian courtesy, polished manners, enormous erudition, formidable conversational abilities, and indescribable personal magnetism. The life of the wild, eccentric, audacious, tortured, horror-haunted, sorrowing, beauty-loving Poe was defined by the unbearable tensions in his paradoxical character. He was a Virginia gentleman and the son of itinerant actors, the heir to a great fortune and a disinherited outcast. A university man who had failed to graduate, a soldier brought out of the army, a court-martialed cadet. Later in life, he would become a husband with an unapproachable child bride, a brilliant editor and low-salaried hack, a world-renowned but impoverished author, the fiancé of 2 women who would not marry him, a normally temperate man and an uncontrollable alcoholic, a rationalist with a mystical cast of mind, and a materialist who yearned for a final unity with God." Okay.
All right, now, open door for Jeffrey Meyer. Is it Jeffrey Meyer, the biographer?
Jeffrey Myers, yeah.
Myers, yeah. Yep. Open door to come on the pod anytime. That is a very well-written couple of paragraphs there. And
it's good.
Yeah, let me say, you don't ever really want to be called feckless.
No, it's actually one of those like insults that's worse than it seems at first.
Yeah, you want to be known for your feck.
Yeah, you're gonna be a fecker. Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm going to read a couple other things because I want to paint a picture of the various people that he influenced. So here's from D.H. Lawrence. People probably at least know the name D.H. Lawrence. Quote, Poe is absolutely concerned with the disintegration processes of his own psyche. As we have said, the rhythm of American art activity is dual. 1, a disintegrating and sloughing off of the old consciousness. 2, the forming of a new consciousness underneath. Fenimore Cooper has the two vibrations going on together. Poe has only one, only the disintegrative vibration. This makes him almost more a scientist than an artist. Moralists have always wondered helplessly why Poe's morbid tales need have been written. They need to be written because old things need to die and disintegrate, because the old writer's psyche has to be gradually broken down before anything else can come to pass. Man must be stripped even of himself, and it is a painful, sometimes a ghastly process. Poe had a pretty bitter doom, doomed to seethe down his soul in a great continuous convulsion of disintegration, and doomed to register the process, and then doomed to be abused for it when he had performed some of the bitterest tasks of human experience that can be asked of a man. Necessary tasks, too, for the human soul must suffer its own disintegration consciously, if ever it is to survive. But Poe is rather a scientist than an artist. He is reducing his own self as a scientist reduces a salt in a crucible. It is an almost chemical analysis of the soul and consciousness, whereas in true art, there is always the double rhythm of creating and destroying. This is why Poe calls his things tales. They are a concatenation of cause and effect. His best pieces, however, are not tales. They are more. They are ghastly stories of the human soul in its disruptive throes. So I want to keep that in mind. The headier take on as we talk about stories like The Pit and the Pendulum and the Telltale Heart. Here's a little bit from the writer and thinker Paul Valery. How do you say it? Valery? That seems way too American.
I don't know. I would say Valerie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I say it in my head. I have this feeling that somebody out there has a much more sophisticated pronunciation.
We have between the two of us, we have a serious dearth of French.
We really do.
Yeah, that is a gap.
We really do. Mm-hmm. Here's what he had to say about Poe, and partially how the poet and writer Baudelaire thought of Poe. Poe is a demon of lucidity, a genius of analysis, and an inventor of the newest, most seductive combinations of logic and imagination, of mysticism and calculation, a psychologist of the exceptional, a literary engineer who studied and utilized all the resources of art. Okay, Poe was also a direct influence on Dostoevsky, which we can see in a couple places that are fairly clear. We can see in Notes from Underground, right? Notes from Underground is narrated by a sort of deranged, morally bankrupt narrator. That was Poe's specialty. We also
just like our show. Go on. Yes. I didn't realize this about the influence on Dostoevsky. That's why. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and I'm going to read you a bit. Later on, I've got a space for it that is going to seem very similar to the moment in Crime and Punishment when the protagonist chops the pawn lady with an axe. Like, that's taken right from Poe almost. And not to discredit Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky is untouchable,
of course,
but everything kind of comes from somewhere. And Dostoevsky was hugely influenced by Poe. In fact,
was he reading Poe in English? Dostoevsky?
I think I don't know.
We'll figure it out when we get to the Dostoevsky episode.
At one point, when Dostoevsky was at the height of his fame in Russia, he wrote an essay on Poe, which eventually led to Poe selling hundreds of thousands of copies in Russia. Right. So, yeah.
Wow.
So Dostoevsky brought Poe to Russia, essentially. Poe was a profound influence on the English aesthetes, Rossetti, Pater, and of course Oscar Wilde, who's the portrait of Dorian Gray. There's nothing more. Nobody wrote anything more like Poe that wasn't actually Poe than the portrait of Dorian Gray. And
Wilde was one of our early episodes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Wilde was one of the key episodes that helped us put together what this podcast was going to be.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because when we started, we didn't realize. In any case, don't stop listening to this episode, but do go back and listen to the Wild episode if you haven't.
Yeah, Oscar Wilde, one of the most fascinating people who ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Oh, totally.
And Portrait of Dorian Gray, not only does it feel like a Poe story, it may have in fact been inspired by a short story of Poe's called The Oval Portrait. Not suggesting any kind of plagiarism here again, but like there is a lineage that Oscar Wilde comes out of, and Poe is there, and he and his contemporaries all celebrated Poe. Poe was a major influence on Robert Louis Stevenson, who borrowed extensively from Poe when he wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, basing it loose, partially taking some things from a story called William Wilson, and also Treasure Island. Poe has a couple of seafaring stories, one of which we're going to talk about at length. Ditto for Rudyard Kipling, who said, quote, "My own personal debt to Poe is a heavy one." And Poe and Kipling borrowed both plot lines, a story about a haunted horse and a story about a murder by an orangutan. So these are not like vague, like Poe wrote a story in which an orangutan murders somebody, and Kipling wrote a story where an orangutan. Right? It's not. Those are pretty close to each other. Conrad was also hugely influenced by Poe. We talked in the Conrad episode. We made a kind of an argument that Conrad was one of the first writers to be sort of against progress writ large. Poe is a precursor to that in some ways that I think we're going to see as this episode unfolds. Heart of Darkness certainly works to evoke the same kind of horror that Poe works in his finest moments. James Joyce, Poe was, quote, the high priest of the modern schools, and he alludes to Poe's work a dozen times throughout his multiple books. Melville was probably influenced by Poe, though we don't have any kind of correspondence to that effect. Fitzgerald's Diamond as Big as a Ritz was influenced by the fall. Was like, I think Fitzgerald may even had a letter to this effect, was influenced by the fall of the House of Usher. Nabokov's Lolita was originally going to be titled The Kingdom by the Sea, which is a line from Poe's final poem, Annabel Lee, about his child bride.
Whoa.
Right.
Lolita was nearly called I'm a Poe boy. I stan Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Probably Lolita is a better title.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Certainly is. Yeah.
I had no idea the influences were this
it's huge.
I had no idea.
This is where, this is my trouble because of how it was introduced. Like I said, through that great, if you've ever seen it, Google The Simpsons. I posted a link in the Telegram, t.me/darkpod. Simpsons adaptation of Poe's The Raven, his famous poem. And that was my introduction. And so for me, Poe is always a kind of an old-timey sort of like almost cliche kind of thing, right? And as I'm going through this and I'm reading some of the stories again, some of them I'm reading again, some of them are new, you kind of realize like this guy was a true original. There was no, you know what I mean? He came from a lineage, but there's some things he did that nobody had ever even thought to do before.
Love it. Did Freud have anything to say about Poe?
Not that I'm aware of. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
When we come around to the Freud episode and do it, I might put a pin in my brain to come back and think about it because, it's so essential to think about like how much of an influence Freud is on everything around us at all times and how he was influenced by literature.
Right.
So, there were psychologists before Freud. He just kind of codified it.
Well, and it is interesting that Poe, I'm not necessarily saying he was the first, but he is maybe the earliest exemplar that we still talk of a writer writing a narrator who's crazy, right? Where the person narrating is actually insane. That's interesting, right?
Such a fun choice. You cannot trust this narrator. And I'm going to put you right into the narrator's head.
Right. And there's nowhere else to go because you're just in their head. There is a sense sometimes in those stories where you feel trapped in this person's consciousness. It's great.
I don't want to hijack the main episode here, so I think we'll save it for the After Dark, but I do want to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that in the After Dark.
On the After Dark, Brett.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. I like it. Let me give you I'm going to read a little bit more from here, and then we're going to get into the actual bio. We're going to go back to his birth and all that. Again, from the Jeffrey Myers biography. Quote, Poe was the first major American writer whose personal reputation influenced the reception of his work. He was also the only 19th century American writer whose poems and stories were valued more highly in Europe than in his homeland. These two facts were closely related. The scandalous reputation that began in Poe's lifetime was fostered by his literary executor and editor, Rufus Griswold. Remember that name, Rufus Griswold, who insisted that Poe was a vicious man and lacked moral principle in his writing. At the same time, he argued, confusing the man with the work, the creator of hallucinating murders must himself be evil to have so evil an imagination. In mid-century America, this was, unfortunately, a powerful argument, and it has proved an enduring one. You imagine you're reading all these stories, and they're little romances and little adventure stories, and then you flip the page, and it's The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, and you're reading this thing, and suddenly this narrator who's saying, I did this, I thought this, I said this, murders his wife, and it's sort of like, and it says Edgar Allan Poe at the top, and it's a little disturbing, right? So, yeah. All right, so let's go back to the beginning with Edgar Allan Poe, and let's figure out.
It's very interesting because the moral panics go on; they just have a different shape now.
It's just about different stuff. Yeah,
it's just about different stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Now we'll talk about. We'll talk about Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay, great.
Great. Later.
I still haven't seen it, so don't spoil it. I'm willing to get like spoilers.
Okay. We'll figure it out on the After Dark. All right, but this is Poe time.
Yeah.
That's right. We're in Poe town now. But listen, I think you've done a fabulous job at the top of this episode of making the case to listen to the rest of this episode so you can understand this man's life, because this influence is incredible, and
it's huge. It's because anybody, it's like it's pretty, it's outsized in a way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So thank you. Yes, we're gonna tell the story. We're gonna say how he got there, what were his tenets, and people are familiar with The Pit and the Pendulum and The Telltale Heart. There are several different Poes in writing, and we're gonna see all of them. So Poe is born in 1809, but we're going to go start in 1775. 1775, Poe's grandfather, David Poe, moves to Baltimore with his family. They'd been settled in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for the last 25 years after emigrating from the bog farms of Dring, Ireland, when the boy was just 7 years old in 1750.
Bog farms?
Yeah, there's farms in boggy country.
Oof.
Yeah. It's not good. You don't want a bog when you're trying to farm.
Doesn't sound. I've never heard of a bog. It doesn't sound ideal.
It's not great.
Yeah,
it's not great. David, this is Poe's grandfather, becomes an assistant deputy quartermaster in Captain John McClellan's company in 1778. He's authorized to make purchases for the American Army. He was well known enough that in 1824, when General Lafayette, and this, we're not going to talk about the Revolutionary War, but when General Lafayette, a name people probably know, returned to Baltimore on this sort of grand tour he did, he asked about his old friend, Mr. Poe, because Mr. Poe had given $40,000 in those days dollars to the Revolutionary War effort. It was never repaid, but it did earn David Poe the title General Poe, even though he never actually earned that rank. So he was the general, but not because he was actually a general. Literally, he was a rich man who became poor to help support the Revolutionary War. I mean, he's a hero in a way, right? Historically speaking. I mean, $40,000 in those days, I don't even know what that is. It's millions.
I looked it up just now on the fly, and so take this with a grain of salt, but it says it would be worth $1.6 million.
Yeah. And his entire, and it was all of it, right?
Yeah.
It was all of his money. On Poe's mother's side, he came from his English grandmother Elizabeth Arnold, who was an actress at the Theatre Royal. In 1795, now widowed, she came to Boston with her daughter Eliza. Eliza, Poe's mother, made her theatrical debut at the age of 9. She married at age 15 this guy named Charles Hopkins and continued her acting career, starring in nearly 300 roles, including Juliet, Ophelia, and many other characters from then, the comedies and farces. And, she'd just play whatever role they needed somebody to play.
300.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was a hit. She was like a local, she was a celebrity on some level. 1806, Charles Hopkins, her husband, dies, and she marries another actor, and this is David Poe Jr. This is Edgar Allan Poe's father. He was born in 1874. So they were both pretty young, and it's possible that she may have just married him for protection. She was young, a teenager still, I believe. Her husband had just died. She had no parents. Let's marry this guy, He was a reasonably successful actor, but nothing like Eliza, and he suffered any number of negative reviews, some of which poked fun at his name. The name Poe. If you want to just get an easy jibe at somebody named Poe, you just say their name is Pooh.
Oh, no. Listen, and nothing has changed. Everybody's a freaking critic. You do anything, you make yourself public doing anything, you write a play, you make a podcast. There's always going to be somebody who finds some fault, and they're good, and they have no
skin in the game.
They have no skin in the game, and nobody is a critic of the critics.
Right? That's a good point. Yeah, we need that.
They're sort of almost above. Well, we don't have to get into it.
Yeah.
Pooh. Come on. Like, God.
Right. You really have to call me Pooh? Like, I get that the acting performance wasn't that good.
Right. I'm putting myself out here, and you're literally calling me.
My father founded the country. Like, come on. Give me a friggin' break, right?
You can't frickin' win with these people.
Right. So David Poe Jr., we don't know a ton about him. He was a drinker, and he was hot-tempered. These things we do know. Soon enough, 1809, here comes Edgar. His mother, and just to paint the picture of, like, they were not doing well. She was a successful actress, but even then a successful actress. In some quarters, it was one step above prostitution. Like, it was sort of frowned upon in polite company. And there also wasn't a ton of money in it. His mother appeared,
and everybody thinks that it's wildly different now, but the reality is that it's kind of not. Like,
there's like 200 people who are like super hyper Hollywood successful, and then there's 1,000
like actual working actors and
commercials and plays and this and that. Yeah. I remember I lived in a I'm not even going to say, because I really like this guy, and I don't want it to sound like but I knew a guy in a city I lived with. I knew him barely, and he was an actor, and he was just in everything. When you went to the haunted cemetery tour, he was the guy who led the haunted cemetery tour. When you went to the science center and they had like a Dr. Nye thing, he was the Dr. Nye guy. When you went over to like this other thing, he was the guy. That's what he did. And he was good at it. He was funny and he was charismatic and he was handsome. Yeah.
Yep. That's a career. For actors.
Yeah. Yep. So in their situation, his mother appeared on stage as part of a traveling troupe just a week before Edgar's birth, and then also performed just 1 month after. So she's not it's have the kid, you keep going pretty much. Edgar was born in a lodging house just south of the Boston Common. So he was born in Boston, but he grew up. Well, we'll get to it. He sort of was itinerant in a way, which we'll see.
And when you say lodging house, we're talking about like the Airbnb type thing of the day.
Yeah, she was
shared communal spaces and right,
exactly. Just to kind of put us in time history, Poe was born the same year as Charles Darwin, Alfred Lord Tennyson, and Abraham Lincoln. Just to give us a sense, they all outlive him, course.
I'm really regretting my misplacement of him in time, but I'm gonna forgive myself again because of his influence. Often when someone's that influential, it feels like they're closer to us than they really are. But I think if I had more time to meditate on him, I would have put him a little earlier. I think maybe the most surprising thing is that he was writing before the Civil War. I would have thought somebody writing that kind of macabre material would have been informed possibly by the Civil War. So that's very interesting.
He was like at least a generation ahead of his time, I think.
Cool.
I think that's partially what's going on here. Boston, like Baltimore, has claimed Poe to a certain degree, but the truth is,
because Boston doesn't have enough influence. Right. They don't have an important school.
They can't just let Baltimore have this guy.
Right.
But here's where we get a little bit of revenge. Poe hated Boston. He hated its stuffiness. He hated transcendentalism. To be honest, he thought it was all a bunch of malarkey.
He just like me for real.
He hated Boston's abolitionism, and most importantly, he hated the way that he thought Boston literary scene not only dominated American literary culture, but that it was boring.
I am so on board with all of this. I can't tell you
except
how much I agree.
Except the hating the abolition part.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the other stuff.
What denomination was Poe's family? Were they just general Protestant?
It didn't really come up that much because his foster father, as we'll see here, wasn't very religious. I think he was baptized Episcopalian, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he was married in a Presbyterian church.
Okay, or general
there might be the other way around.
Protestant.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. Okay.
So Poe suddenly appearing in this family, and like we said, lodging house. His parents are actors. The family was already kind of teetering on, a very precarious financial situation, and Poe, a little baby coming into the scene, just throws us all out of whack. Just a few weeks after his birth, they actually leave Edgar with the General Poe and General Poe's wife, his grandmother, so they could continue touring because they had to go make money, right? And you got a little baby. We gotta make some things happen. We gotta stack that cheese. Let me read a little bit about being his time with the General. Let's see. That's Poe's parents, returned to fetch him in late August when the season was over, placing Edgar and later his sister Rosalie in the care of an old nursemaid. A friend reported that the two children were thin and pale and very fretful. To quiet them, their old nurse took them upon her lap and fed them liberally with bread soaked in gin when they soon fell asleep. She acknowledged that she had, from the very birth of Rosalie, freely administered to them gin and other spirituous liquors, with sometimes laudanum to make them strong and healthy, or to put them to sleep when restless. The etiology of Poe's alcoholism began in infancy. Okay.
I hope you're taking notes for those new parents out there. Yeah. What was it? It was gin soaked in bread.
Yeah.
Around my house, we call that a dirty Poe. Here's a question for you, Brad. Were you aware? I have two young children at home. Were you aware that a baby can teethe so much, and that their drool causes them to have rash?
I've heard of this. Yes.
I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, saliva can be an irritant if there's like too much of it. And
boy, I mean, human jack-o'-lantern season. Just teeth every which way, and that poor little baby. Anyway, okay. So, fellow parents out there, thoughts and prayers for my family, and going back out to you too. It is not an easy thing to raise children.
No. Yeah. It's miraculous that we decide to do it over and over again. In a way,
it's miraculous that any of us make it to adulthood.
There is like a part where it's like it's funny, we joke like friends and I have joked, like, the reason a baby is cute is so you don't just throw them out the window.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Well, like when I do Pearl Jam for karaoke, I do "I'm Still Alive," but I always kind of put a question mark at the end of it. I'm still alive.
Really? Wow.
I do the William Shatner cover of "I'm Still Alive." I'm still alive.
Right.
Yeah. We have fun on Art of Darkness. We do.
Okay. So you might have caught that from that excerpt I read. Poe had a sister. He also had a brother. They're going to come back. I'm not going to talk about them much here. In 1811, having given up the stage for booze, Poe's father leaves the family, just abandons them. And then a few months later, he was dead. In October of 1811, Eliza, Poe's mother, made her last stage appearance, followed by an intense illness. This was in Richmond, Virginia. They'd pretty much decamped to Richmond, Virginia at this point. When she came down with this intense illness, the Richmond Society tried their best to attend to her, basically raise money for her. There was even a benefit performance put on by the Richmond Theater and pleas in the Richmond Inquirer newspaper for donations to help her out. But on December 8th, 1811, Eliza died of tuberculosis. Edgar was just, a month shy of 3 years old.
Oh, no. I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So let me read just a little bit here on
Wow.
this.
I mean, we always, on this pod, we always mark when one of the artists we cover loses one parent. I think, who else have we done where they've lost both parents this young?
I don't know if we have any straight up orphans that I can think of. No.
Yeah, this is a first for the pod.
Yeah.
Wow.
Quote, the desertion of his father and the death of his mother must have had considerable emotional impact on the nearly 3-year-old child. Closeted with his mother in their cramped quarters, he must have remembered something of the melancholy atmosphere, poignant silence, and hopeless despair as the attendants passed in and out of the sick room. He surely retained some memory of the racking coughs, the spitting of blood, the sudden crimson hemorrhages, and the pallid figure extended on her deathbed. Poe later emphasized his artistic heritage and exclaimed, quote, the writer of this article is himself the son of an actress, has invariably made it his boast, and no earl was ever prouder of his earldom than he of his descent from a woman who, although well-born, hesitated not to consecrate to drama her brief career of genius and of beauty. Besides the inscribed watercolor of Boston Harbor, Poe inherited his mother's precocity, talent, imagination, dedication to art, and courage in adversity, as well as the indelible image of a beautiful, dying young woman. He would also share her itinerant way of life, her impoverished existence, and her dreary death. Okay.
Not only do we have two actors for parents, one a failure, one successful actor,
but short-lived.
Yeah. And now they're both dead.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yes. Whoa, doggy.
Yeah, it's not great. Now, there's a little story I want to tell that's not directly related to Poe, but when we think about Poe, the spookiness of Poe's work, the supernatural aspects of it, let me read you this, talk a little bit about something that happened after Eliza died. So Eliza Poe dies on December 8th. Remember, there was a benefit performance at the Richmond Theater. A little over a week after this benefit performance, at a stage in which she was a favorite, right? There were positive write-ups. People came to see her as much as they came to see whatever play she happened to be in. Now, on December 26th, just a few weeks later, the Richmond Theater held a benefit for another theater maker. This was a guy named Alexander Placide. Doesn't matter. This benefit was postponed in part because of the death of Eliza Poe, right? She's such a big figure in this scene. But at this benefit, this other one for this guy named Alexander Placide, in attendance were a number of dignitaries, including George William Smith, former senator, a guy who had been one of Aaron Burr's lawyers. I think the governor of Virginia was there. Actually, I think that's who George William Smith is, right? Like a bunch of big, important people in Virginia were at this benefit performance. Let me read this bit. Quote, The fire started after the curtain fell following the first act of the pantomime, when the chandelier was lifted toward the ceiling with the flames still lit. The lamp became entangled in the cords used to lift the chandelier, and it touched one of the items used in the front scenes, which caught fire. As soon as the boy worker who was operating the cord saw the flames, he fled the building. The flames rose up to the scenery and spread in the fly gallery from one hanging scene to the other. There were 35 such hanging scenes which could be lowered. In addition to the hangings were also the borders that provided the outlines of buildings and skies, among other set pieces. These too caught fire sequentially. Pine planks fixed over rafters with no plastering and ceiling spread the flames, which fell from the ceiling and spread extremely rapidly. The impact of the fire was worsened because the stage curtain hid the initial flames from the audience.
Oh, no. And theater, so you literally have fire raining down on an old-timey audience of stinky people.
Yeah, I can't. I thought whatever. I put the number in. It was dozens of people died.
That's terrible.
The theater burned down. I mean, there's like a whole Wikipedia page about this event. This is the same theater that Poe's mother was one of the most popular actresses in. And so here is this is why I spent some time on this. Kevin, have you ever heard of the Poe story Hop Frog?
I maybe have heard of it, but I don't know. Yeah.
Not one of his most popular, one of his best, in my opinion. There is it's actually one of his last stories. I think it was written in 1849, the year of his death. 1849. Let me just read you the wiki, and then I'm going to read you a little thing, keeping in mind this theater fire. Hop Frog is a short story first published in 1849. The title character, a person with dwarfism taken from his homeland, becomes the jester of a king particularly fond of practical jokes. Taking revenge on the king and his cabinet for the king's striking of his friend and fellow dwarf Trippetta, he dresses the king and his cabinet as orangutans for a masquerade. In front of the king's guests, Hop Frog murders them all by setting their costumes on fire. Okay. Let me read you a little bit of this because we haven't had any Poe's voice yet, really. So I'm just going to read a little snippet from Hop Frog.
Hop Frog.
Yeah.
The dwarf who gets his revenge.
He gets his revenge. And again, we have the orangutans. I think Poe is very interested in orangutans or orangutangs, I think is how they said it back then. All right. This is just the end of Hop Frog. Quote. And now, while the whole assembly, the apes included, remember, Hop Frog has tricked the king and his retinue into dressing up because it's like, you'll be part of the show. It'll be funny. And now, while the whole assembly, the apes included, were convulsed with laughter, the jester suddenly uttered a shrill whistle when the chain flew violently up for about 30 feet, dragging with it the dismayed and struggling orang-utangs, and leaving them suspended in midair between the skylight and the floor. Hop Frog, clinging to the chain as it rose, still maintained his relative position in respect to the ape maskers, and still continued to thrust his torch down toward them as though endeavoring to discover who they were. They had been tarred and then had hair put on them, so they're covered in tar. So thoroughly astonished was the whole company at this ascent that a dead silence of about a minute's duration ensued. It was broken by just such a low, harsh, grating sound as had before attracted the attention of the king and his counselors when the former threw the wine in the face of Trippetta. But on the present occasion, there could be no question as to whence the sound issued. It came from the fang-like teeth of the dwarf, who ground them and gnashed them as he foamed at the mouth, and glared with an expression of maniacal rage into the upturned countenances of the king and his 7 companions. "Aha," said at length the infuriated jester. "Aha, I begin to see who these people are now." Here, pretending to scrutinize the king more closely, he held the flambeau to the flaxen coat which enveloped them, and which instantly burst into a sheet of vivid flame. In less than half a minute, the whole 8 orangutans were blazing fiercely amid the shrieks of the multitude who gazed at them from below, horror-stricken and without the power to render them the slightest assistance. Okay.
Banger.
Yeah.
Cinematic.
It
feels like a movie.
It's putting all the pieces are in place and you can see it.
It sounds like something that if you wrote it today, you wouldn't be wildly off the mark of what people want right now.
Yeah, no, it's hyper violent. It's revenge fantasy. It's got all kinds of elements that I think. And again,
it's got monkeys. People love monkeys.
People love monkeys, right? Yeah, it's an interesting story. I had never heard about. I was completely unfamiliar with that story. If you go,
how would they say orangutan is for the children? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Just a quick shout out. If you go on YouTube, you can find Christopher Lee reading 6 or 8 different Poe stories. Christopher Lee, the great actor, the late great. They're phenomenal. He does such a good job. You should, and he does Hop Frog, and it's mwah, chef's kiss.
I think that I saw something recently about, was he in Wicker Man? Christopher Lee?
Gosh, I don't think so, but maybe.
Yeah, no, he was. He was Lord Summerisle.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Youngish Christopher Lee.
What's funny is he gave an interview at some point where the person who created the Wicker Man, the director, told him the title, and apparently he was hiding the ending from everybody. That's something smart. Like this. And Christopher Lee was like, "Oh, is it about pagan sacrifice?" And the director's like, "Damn you, you're the only one who knew." And Christopher Lee was like, "Well, I studied folklore. I studied, So
right. Yeah, Christopher Lee was the real deal, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so Poe is an orphan. Theater is burnt down. His mother has died. His father has died. Poe is an orphan. His grandfather, General Poe, is basically destitute. Remember, he had a fortune. He never got it back after the Revolutionary War. So Poe is taken in by a man named John Allan, Allan. This is where we get Edgar Allan Poe. The Allan actually comes from the name of his foster father, which, as we'll see, was probably a little bit of an albatross around Edgar's neck, and yet he kept it. John Allan had been an orphan himself, which probably, contributed to him wanting to take in young Edgar. I think Henry, Edgar's brother Henry, went to another family, and his sister Rosalie ended up going to the General Poe. We'll get to their fates eventually here. John Allan was a Scotsman who'd emigrated to Richmond, Virginia when he was 16 and established himself as a successful merchant, trading basically whatever. Virginia tobacco, textiles, hardware, paints, coffee, wine, liquor, horses, pigs, and the occasional, quote, old slave, who they hired out at coal pits until they died. John Allan was not, John Allan was not a particularly nice man, though he did attempt to spoil young Edgar. Let me read a little bit about this. Quote, "The Allans dressed Edgar like a young prince and took him each summer to White Sulphur Springs and other fashionable resorts. At the age of 3, he was a quote, lovely fine fellow with dark curls and brilliant eyes, charming everyone by his childish grace, vivacity, and cleverness. His parents were fond of exhibiting his precocious talents to their evening guests, and Edgar's retentive memory and musical ear enabled him to learn and recite the most moving and beautiful passages of English poetry. He was encouraged to stand on the dining room table in his stockinged feet and toast the health of the ladies with a glass of sweetened wine. Allan, that's John Allan, his foster father, a poor disciplinarian, confused the child by alternately spoiling and scolding him." Okay, so he went from itinerant actors, drunk arguments, poor, to this guy, successful businessman, spoiling and scolding him, putting him in situations he wasn't familiar with. Interesting sort of transition. In 1815, after the hostilities of the War of 1812, John Allan, again a Scotsman, packed up the family for a business venture back in London. They visited Scottish family and put Edgar in a boarding school in Chelsea, where he studied, spelling, history, geography, etc.
Wow, that is a shocking move.
It is
going to the heart of London. From where? From Baltimore?
From Richmond, Virginia.
From Richmond, Virginia. It's a different planet.
Sure.
Even now it is.
Yeah, for sure. 1818. So Poe is 9 years old. Edgar was put into a different boarding school out in the country village of Stoke Newington, just north of London. This is just coincidentally the same town in which Daniel Defoe wrote Robinson Crusoe. Let me read you a quick thing on that. Again, from this great Jeffrey Myers biography. Quote, a historian of education has emphasized the mechanical rote learning that prevailed in English schools at the time. Excuse me. There was no genuine teaching, no conception of the processes of education, of learning, nothing but continuous memorizing of a series of classical texts whose content was rarely expounded or understood. And a biographer has described a school similar to Poe's at Enfield, 6 miles north of Stoke Newington, which Keats attended in 1803 when he was 8 years old. The basis of the curriculum was Latin, French, and mathematics, the atmosphere less cruel and more congenial than in the older and more famous schools. So I'm going to read a little bit. It's not about the school that Poe went to, but it's about like the next school over, which would have been very, very much the same. The small academy at Enfield, with almost 75 students, was not thought of as a preparatory school for scholars any more than for sons of the aristocracy. The intention was to offer a fairly liberal education to students whose families were in trade or in the less affluent professions and who were not necessarily looking forward to entering a university. Some mathematics and science were taught, and the grounding in Latin was good. Greek was probably not taught. French was taught, and Keats learned to read it fluently. If Enfield lacked the advantages of the great public schools, it had compensations. There was no... I'm not going to say that word. There even seems to have been little or no physical punishment. The school was small enough. The school was small enough for so that the enlightened influence of the headmaster was constantly felt. Okay.
Now, let me just say something. I recognize these different names, Stoke Newington, Enfield, and I'm like, well, not that. It's like that's all literally like central London now.
Oh yeah,
it's all London now.
Now it was the outskirts or even beyond, but yeah, of course now it's actually part of the megalopolis. Let's talk right here about another underappreciated short story of Poe's. We are going to talk about the classics that you know about.
Are we not saying the word buggery anymore on the pod? Or was it a different
they
word?
used an F word.
I got you. Okay, interesting.
It doesn't play.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
So
F's in the chat.
Yeah. So this story I'm going to talk about is William Wilson. Just talk about it briefly because I think it's thematically critical to understanding what Poe's deal is. So William Wilson is a story about a person named, of course, William Wilson. He's a boy. Or this story, when the story starts, he's a boy in a quote misty looking village of England, so like Stoke Newington. William Wilson encounters a boy who, this is kind of creepy just in setup, honestly. He encounters a boy who looks like him, dresses like him, acts like him, has the same name and the same birthday. It's that to me that is like a Twilight Zone-y kind of setup is like kind of unnerving.
Lynchian kind of doppelgangers are an old, weird, uncanny thing. I think because we're all our own doppelganger. You know, we're all sort of reflecting ourselves back at ourselves. Some of us more than others, in varying ways. But it is interesting. It would be an interesting idea for like a high concept story. Would be like somebody creates an online persona and then meets that online persona IRL.
right. Who's actually living that?
One of these anime anons on Twitter. It actually manifests it as like a tulpa in the real world and can't get rid of it. It moves in.
Right.
That's a good idea. That's a free idea for anybody who wants to go.
There you go.
That. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Don't say we never did anything for you.
Now, in this story, throughout William Wilson's life, he's haunted by this double. So it's not just at school. Like it's one thing. He's in school with him the whole time. But he continues being with him into his adult life. And this double, who can only speak in a whisper for some reason, is always trying to advise him. He's always showing up at crucial moments to thwart William Wilson's plans or to point out how wretched he is. All of this eventually leads to the protagonist, William Wilson, murdering his double. So it's just a cool, I think the premise by itself is very cool.
This is cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of skip reading that part, just kind of moving on.
What was the name of that story again?
It's just called William Wilson. Yeah. But I am going to tell you a little bit about, and part of the reason I brought it up now is because there's a big part in it about being in a school in semi-rural England that Poe just took directly from his life. Let me read you a little bit from the bio about Poe as a boy, because I think this is interesting. Hunter, let's see. Oh, this is more about his education, actually. So Hunter described the quality of Edgar's education in England, his precocious poetry, Bransby's opinion of his character. Bransby was the headmaster. And what is most interesting in connection with Allan's later meanness with money, Bransby's belief that his most famous pupil had been spoiled by his foster father's extravagance. Here's what Bransby, the headmaster, said. When Poe left it, he was able to speak the French language, construe any easy Latin author, and was far better acquainted with history and literature than many boys of a more advanced age who had had greater advantages than he had had. I spoke to Dr. Bransby about him 2 or 3 times during my school days, having then, as now, a deep admiration for his poems, a copy of which I received as a prize for an effort in English verse. Dr. Bransby seemed rather to shun the topic. I suppose from some feelings with regard to his name being used distastefully in the story of William Wilson. In answer to my question, on one occasion, he said Edgar Allan, that was the name that Poe was known by at school, was just Edgar Allan. Edgar Allan was a quick and clever boy and would have been a very good boy if he had not been spoilt by his parents. But they spoilt him and allowed him an extravagant amount of pocket money, which enabled him to get into all manner of mischief. Still, I liked the boy. Poor fellow, his parents spoilt him. He also said at one time that Edgar Allan Poe was intelligent, wayward, and willful. Okay. Now, in 1820, the Allans moved back to the United States. So Poe would have been about 11 years old. Let me read a little bit on that. Because this is people, I got a couple quotes here from people who knew. Go ahead.
I'm not surprised that he lived in England based on his education, what the education he must have received. I mean, at some point he was going to have to go to like a very, very, very good school. So I'm not surprised that it was over there.
Yeah. But, he comes back. It's only until age 11. Right. So
fair enough. But these years don't surprise me. And the fact that they're saying he's precocious.
Multiple people over time would say how powerful his memory was. This comes up multiple times where it's just like he could remember everything. He could just recite stuff he'd read a couple times.
Boy, and let me tell you, you have a good memory. It makes sense to want to pour a lot of alcohol right on top of that sucker. If you're thinking about something that happened 15 years ago. And you can see it in your mind's eye. You can rotate that apple of shame in your mind's eye. Yeah, you might want to soak some bread in gin.
That's right. That's right. Now back in the United States, 1820, they come back to America. It's actually going pretty well. He's the child of a wealthy man who maybe spoils him, maybe scolds him a little bit too much, but he's certainly out of that precariousness that he had with his parents as actors. And all of it's going pretty smoothly until 1824, when he would have been 15 years old. At this time, while at a boarding school, he'd become friends, quote, in quotes, with the mother of one of his friends, right? And this is a woman named Jane Stannard. He was as devoted to her as a son might be to his mother, right? And you can imagine there probably was an element. I mean, he's 15. He's not 9 or 5. He's, post-pubescent. So you can imagine there's erotic or romantic undertones, whatever to this.
Just tones
in general. Yeah.
Yeah. We get tones.
Yeah. That she, not long after he met her, she soon died, quote, insane, according to Jeffrey Myers, which I don't know exactly what it means to die. And like, Is it one of the things you die from being insane, or you die and you happen to be insane at the same time? I'm not sure.
We do this podcast long enough. Stick around. You're gonna find out, Brad. It's gonna happen.
That's right. Let me read a little bit about this because it's an important biographical note. Quote, after Jane's death, the future creator of horror stories described the apparitions that appeared in his nightmares. Quote, the most horrible thing he could imagine as a boy was to feel an ice-cold hand laid upon his face in a pitch-dark room when alone at night, or to awaken in semi-darkness and see an evil face gazing close into his own. And these fancies had so haunted him that he would often keep his head under the bed covering until nearly suffocated. The superstitious skeptic, who could be terrified by his own imagination, later confessed to the editor George Graham that he, quote, disliked the dark and was rarely out at night. On one occasion, he said to me, I believe that demons take advantage of the night to mislead the unwary. Although, he added, I don't believe in demons. Okay, so adolescent Poe eventually becomes college-age Poe. In 1825, he's 16. Poe meets and becomes supposedly engaged to the daughter of his neighbor. This is in Richmond, Virginia. This is a woman named Elmira Royster. They're like 15, 16 years old. I just want to kind of put the fact that she exists there because she ends up coming back later. Her father would interfere in their love affair. And after around 1826, we don't really actually hear anything more about Elmira Royster for like 20 years. But he had this very young love affair. He thought that they were going to get married. It doesn't work out. Now, Poe was already writing at this time, this middle adolescence. He was writing poetry probably by about age 14, if not earlier. His foster father, John Allan, recognized that Poe had talent, that he had a, quote, genius, which would, quote, someday fill the world with his fame. But he also believed that this talent led Poe to being impulsive and wayward. We have a lot of impulsive people. We don't have that many people who are wayward anymore. You don't hear, oh, he's a wayward so-and-so anymore. I think we need to bring back wayward.
Yeah. Well, the 60s happened and there's that whole not all who wander are lost. And I think the world has become a lot more, even though it might not feel that this way, I do think the world has become a lot more forgiving. I think
that's true in some ways. Yeah.
The bottom then was just like death. Like, and it still is. It still is. But I feel like we maybe get a few more spins of the wheel here.
Yeah.
We grow up slower. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like all like cancel culture stuff now or whatever. But like there was at this time where like a 15, 16-year-old girl in certain sets of society, if she got caught kissing a boy, she's like a soiled woman forever. Right. Yeah. We don't have that kind of thing.
Just ship her to the country.
Right. Yeah, exactly. She'd have to like take a lifetime of cold showers or whatever. Yeah. So as Poe gets older into his teenage years, and this, you can imagine this is not uncommon, things with his foster father get more and more difficult. He's very devoted and he loves his foster mother, but he and his foster father butt heads constantly. And I think it gets to the point that if someone wanted to blame somebody other than Poe for all of Poe's ills, and as we're going to see, there are a lot of Poe's life is not good. Like you wouldn't trade almost no one would trade their life for his. And I think you could put that at the feet of John Allan in a certain way. But on the other hand, Poe himself, he's strange, he's temperamental, he can't really motivate himself toward anything unless it's exactly what he wants to be doing. And so, his foster father, who's this like successful industrialist, exporting and importing, and he's a businessman, and his son's a poet and is the kind of
I'm Art Vandelay,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Importing and exporting. Okay.
Right.
Well, it's like there's so many people that we've covered so far or in the general line. Like, Okay, we buy things and we sell them for high. Like, what do you mean the general line? In any case,
yeah. Now, quick thing on John Allan. This gets fairly interesting. Now, we know that about Poe. John Allan, also temperamental. You got two very temperamental people, strong personalities. He's also very smart. He's an exacting guy, and the one thing he did, which is maybe we can take a parenting lesson from this. Whenever he got angry with Edgar, he would threaten to cut him off. So it's like, even when Edgar's like 12 and he's not cooperating, it's like, I'll cut you off. I'm not really your dad. That's tough. You got to give him some room to screw up and argue a little bit, right? You can't
what is it? I'm not the dad. I'm the dad who stepped up.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, but we really do have the material here of folklore. Or orphan children are at the quintessential heart of at least Western folklore, and the sort of, not maybe abusive, but the step parenting is hard, and you hear about the wicked step parents, for a reason. It's a difficult relationship.
It's tough for the parents, tough for the kid. It's statistically, it's not great,
it's not.
So it's not easy for anybody involved.
Right. Because the little bastards are so difficult.
They are. Yeah. Now,
this is a step parent respecter podcast.
It better be.
I mean, I was raised in part by a stepfather.
Yeah, I'm a step parent.
God damn it, and Brad's a step parent. And God damn it, you better respect the step parents.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not that it's harder; it's different, but also hard. Yeah. Now, as the 1820s wore on, and Allan's finances kind of took a dip, the business faltered a little bit, he became surlier and more miserable, right? So it's one thing when he's rich and he's got a cute little kid. It's another thing when his finances aren't so great and he's got an asshole, moody teenage boy, right? These are two different worlds.
I want to love you. I want to love you, son. But the crypto's crashing.
Exactly.
I don't have any room in my heart for you when Doge is 6 cents. We pumped it. I gotta love my kid.
Hashtag something. I don't know what it is. Now this slightly changes in 1825. An uncle of John Allan, this is a strange turn of events, an uncle of John Allan's named William Galt, who happens to be the richest man in Virginia, dies and leaves John Allan a fortune of, at the time, several $100,000.
Which we know now would be worth at least multiple millions of dollars.
Multiple millions.
In today's money.
Yeah. Wealthy man. Now, this was money that Poe could have inherited if he'd simply stayed on good terms with his foster father. Toward that end, in 1826, Poe goes to the University of Virginia. Now, University of Virginia, I did not know how interesting University of Virginia was as a place. To me, it was just another university. I'm sure a good school, but I didn't know anything about the history. The University of Virginia was founded in 1819 by none other than Thomas Jefferson. It is now apparently a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I did not know any of this. Yeah, Kevin, you had.
I think I knew that. But I think that
Yeah, Jefferson designed almost every aspect of the place, from picking the site, designing the buildings, hiring the professors, planning the curriculums. He wrote the regulations with the stated purpose to, quote, develop the reasoning faculties of our youth, enlarge their minds, cultivate their morals, and instill into them the precepts of virtue and order, and generally, to form them to the habits of reflection and correct action, rendering them example of virtue to others and of happiness within themselves. It was a sort of an inspiration for the American college model in a lot of ways. And there were other ones, and there were other American colleges that came before this, but it was a deliberate effort to create a particular kind of atmosphere.
Well, and thank God that he did that, because otherwise we wouldn't have the University of Minnesota, the finest institution in the Americas. Full stop. Go Gophers.
That was his whole.
It was all Jefferson knew he was just. It was a trial run in Virginia.
Yeah, you can't start in Minnesota. I mean,
right?
Not at that time.
Not at that time, but they knew.
Yeah. Now, pursuant to trying to create this environment, there was no presence of religion on campus, and students were expected to sort of author their own lives to the fullest extent possible. There were a number of things that were strictly forbidden. These included smoking, drinking, gambling, fighting, horses, servants, dueling.
Ooh, boring. These things were dueling. I want to go to a dueling school. For real.
Yeah, could you imagine just take like American college drinking culture and then just add occasionally there's a duel on top of it?
Well, we full disclosure, we do have a little bit of that over here at the University of Minnesota. Right? So we'll just it's a very good school. It's a very good school.
Yeah. Now I say that all of these things were strictly forbidden. What I should have said is, well, that while that is true, they were omnipresent. It was everywhere.
Oh, damn.
Because Jefferson was like, well, we'll let these young men author their own lives. And, well, they shouldn't drink or smoke or do any, they're 18 years old. They're away from home for the first time. Nothing changes, right? So Poe is introduced to this environment. Now, at the same time, he's a much more than competent student. He barely had to study. Remember, powerful memory, good education leading up to this. In December of 1826, he was examined for 2 hours by none other than James Madison, who'd followed Thomas Jefferson as the rector, and James Monroe. People who are founding father respecters will know those names. Poe was awarded highest honors in both ancient and modern languages. He was among the best students of his cohort at the University of Virginia. Nonetheless, he had few, if any, close friends at the University of Virginia. Reports vary from the time as to whether he was a wild man or a sober, quiet student. It's like it depended who you talk to, what his persona was like. He was even physically remembered in different ways. Some people remembered him as like slender and athletic, and some people remembered him as like short and stout. Like there's like conflicting reports of like who this guy even was when he was on campus.
Well, yeah, they were all drunk.
They're all wasted.
They're all wasted and looking over their shoulder for the next duel.
Right. Yeah. So let me give you this is somebody who did this is apparently the most vivid account of Poe at the University of Virginia from this guy Miles George, who would later become a prominent Virginia doctor. Quote, Poe was fond of quoting poetic authors and reading poetic productions of his own, with which his friends were delighted and entertained. Then suddenly a change would come over him. He would, with a piece of charcoal, evince his versatile genius by sketching upon the walls of his dormitory whimsical, fanciful, and grotesque figures with so much artistic skill as to leave us in doubt whether Poe in future life would be painter or poet. He was very excitable and restless, at times wayward, melancholic and morose, but again, in his better moods, frolicsome. You never hear that word. We don't hear wayward very often, but I don't know if I've ever heard frolicsome. In better moods, frolicsome, full of fun, and a most attractive. Go ahead.
Let me read the definition of wayward. Okay. How would you define wayward if you had to define it, Brad?
My assumption is it's like you go off the straight and narrow. Whatever the straight and narrow is, it's going off that.
Yeah, the precise definition is difficult to control or predict because of unusual or perverse behavior.
Oh.
So
I have been known to be wayward.
Indeed. Yeah. I know you have been known to be wayward. Merriam-Webster says following one's own capricious, wanton, or depraved inclinations, ungovernable.
Become wayward.
Become wayward. Absolutely. You really want to fit into this system?
Right.
You want to be well adjusted to this system.
Right.
Become wayward. Artofdarkpod.com. We're here for the wayward people.
That's right. That's true. That's very much true. Let me give you one last bit from this Miles George quote. I love this. Become wayward. To calm and quiet the excessive nervous excitability under which Poe labored, he would too often put himself under the influence of that, quote, invisible spirit of wine. So we've got Poe drinking a bit. He's not the first person to go off to college and drink a little bit too much. But this is a particularly turbulent environment to get an education in. Like like a lot of colleges are. But let me tell you, like, how out of hand it got. In 1840, now this is well after Poe's time, but there's a trajectory going on here. Things at the University of Virginia got so out of hand that a professor was actually murdered while trying to stop a student disturbance. Right. It was like the Wild West, but in like a Thomas Jefferson designed, beautiful environment.
Things are pretty hot on campuses these days. I hope everybody can cool down and we don't see any violence like this.
Yes. Well, I'm glad to not be on a college campus anymore, to be frank with you.
This is our college campus.
Yeah,
we are. Exactly. We're our own little. We're adjunct professors of our own, Brad.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read you a quote from a friend of Poe's, a later friend, Thomas Holly Chivers. This is a little bit more about alcohol and that sort of thing. Quote. Poe's passion for strong drink was as marked and as peculiar as that for cards. It was not the taste of the beverage that influenced him. Without a sip or smack of the mouth, he would seize a full glass without water or sugar and send it home with a single gulp. This frequently used him up. Poe was particularly fond of playing cards, 7-Up and Loo, I don't know what that game is, being his favorite games. He played 7-Up. Isn't 7-Up that thing you play as a kid where you like put your head down and like somebody taps you on the back of the head? You ever play Heads Up 7-Up?
Heads Up 7-Up, but that's not a card game though, is it?
Well, it says his favorite game is 7-Up. I don't know. I don't know what
it'd be some sort of a card game. I'm looking up Loo, Loo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says Loo was a trivial and once disreputable trick-taking game for 5 or more players. It was equally popular as a gambling game when it could get quite vicious.
Sure.
Or as a mild domestic pastime, such as it appears in the novels of Jane Austen. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It is funny that later on in I believe it's the Murders at Rue Morgue. Poe goes on a whole thing about the example, like what the rational mind is and what's a real analyst, an analytical brain. And he makes the argument that to a true analytical mind, the card game of whist is much richer than the game of chess. I've never played whist. I couldn't speak to that, but I just thought that was kind of interesting now reading this. So
were you raised among card people? Because
euchre. I'm a Michigander. We play euchre.
You play euchre. Okay, I did see that Lou is in the family of euchre.
Yeah, euchre would be a good gambling game. I never gambled much with it, but it would be a good gambling game.
We played hearts, rummy in my family, and I didn't play it. And much to my family's dismay, pinochle. Where I'm from, like pinochle was huge.
I never played pinochle. I've played rummy and I've played other games, but like in Michigan.
I do have a theory that like if we as a generation, or I guess maybe it's too late for us now, Brad, but if the Zoomers really wanted to do any one cultural thing that might save the country and get people to start making eye contact again, it would be to host card parties.
Yeah, those can you imagine more? That used to be all anybody did.
That was it. Yeah. I mean, even when I was growing up, that was it in the 90s. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Become wayward and host euchre parties.
Yeah, euchre parties.
You heard it here.
Yeah. Now I want to say something about Poe's relationship to alcohol. Poe wasn't necessarily a person who was drinking all of the time. He seemed to have a peculiar physiological response in which 1 or 2 drinks could get him just hammered. He seemed to take very little to any joy in drinking. It was like he
call that a cheap date.
Yeah, right. He just went to the dark side pretty much immediately. And he could go long stretches without drinking. I mean, he would go months without drinking anything. And then he would have a drink, and then he would proceed to dismantle his life over the course of a week or two. And then he would sober up and be sober for months again. So that's the kind of guy we're dealing with here.
Do you think psychologically, do you think he was like chasing the ghosts of his dead parents?
I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure that's part of it. Yeah. I don't think he ever came to peace with that. Well, and then he, this woman, when in 1824, this woman who was the mother of a friend, she dies. She's also fairly young. We're going to see in a bit, his foster mother dies when Poe's like 20, and he loved her. Like, all the women around him just drop. So yeah, I think that's certainly a factor. Now Poe, he only lasts at the University of Virginia for a year. He's a good student. He's the best student in modern and ancient languages, right? So why does he leave? His father's one of the wealthiest men, in all things considered, he should have just stuck with it. He didn't have any academic problems despite whatever drinking and gambling he was doing. So why does he leave? Well, it comes down to money, ultimately. According to Jeffrey Myers, and later bemoaned in letters from Poe to John Allan, his foster father, John Allan didn't send Poe with enough money. So here's the thing. It's great to pay for your kids' college. And pay for whatever they need. But like, basically, John Allan put Poe in the situation where he paid for his tuition, he paid for room and board, and that was it. And it was like, he had nothing else. Like, his clothes, when his ripped his pants, he couldn't buy new clothes, he couldn't buy shoes, he couldn't buy any of the normal stuff of life.
Right. And it's not like now where he could maybe take a little odd job off campus at a coffee shop or something.
Right. Yeah. It's like and there's some indications he did this deliberately, like put him in this situation where like he was almost taken care of, but that had no means of making up the rest.
Boy, I can't relate to this at all. Yo.
Yeah. It's called being born in the 80s.
Me. Damn. Wait, not to get too derailed, but like it always shocked me to realize time and time again when I would meet people at the university who didn't seem to work and they seemed to have scratch to go to spring break and whatever. I realized like, oh, you're just like, you're like a kept creature. Like, I'm working and getting the degree in 4 years.
Right.
Damn. There are a lot of us out there.
Yeah. I worked not grad school necessarily, but I worked my whole way through 2 undergrad degrees. So this basically is the situation, and Poe claims that and Poe ends up in a bunch of gambling debt. He ends up in $2,500 at the time in gambling debt. A lot of money. And so, but Poe would claim like, well, Father, what did you expect me to do? I had to make up this money somehow. And then he got like lost in a cycle of gambling, right?
I'm a professional. I'm just down. Just stake me harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Man, I tell you what, when Doge is 10 cents again, you're going to love me.
Right.
Yeah.
Now let me read you part of a letter. This is that Poe wrote later.
The game is called Lou because that's where your finances go.
In the turtlet. This is a letter that comes later because Poe is mostly poor. He's never not poor. The best he's ever doing is like kind of all right. And a few years after college, he writes John Allan, his foster father, this letter. Quote, I will boldly say that it was wholly and entirely your own mistaken parsimony that caused all the difficulties in which I was involved while at Charlottesville. Charlottesville is University of Virginia. The expenses of the institution at the lowest estimate were $350 per annum. Most students need at least 500. You sent me there with 110. Of this, 50 were to be paid immediately for board, 60 for attendance upon 2 professors, and you even then did not miss the opportunity for abusing me because I did not attend 3. Then 15 more dollars were to be paid for room rent. Remember that all this was to be paid in advance with $110. $12 more for a bed and $12 more for room furniture. I had, of course, the mortification of running in debt for public property against the known rules of the institution and was immediately regarded in the light of a beggar. You will remember that in a week after my arrival, I wrote to you for some more money and for books. You replied in terms of the utmost abuse. If I had been the vilest wretch on earth, you could not have been more abusive than you were because I could not contrive to pay $150 with 110. Okay, a little bit further down the letter. Books were bought on credit. In this manner, debts were accumulated and money borrowed from Jews in Charlottesville at extravagant interest, for I was obliged to hire a servant to pay for wood, for washing, and 1,000 other necessaries. It was then that I became dissolute, for how could it be otherwise? I applied to James Galt. This is the son of John Allen's benefactor, William Galt. But he, I believe, from the best of motives, refused to lend me any. I then became desperate and gambled until I finally involved myself irretrievably. You would not let me return because bills were presented you for payment, which I never wished nor desired you to pay. See, when Poe couldn't pay, they sent the bills to his dad, right? And his dad's like, "What? He's racking up all of this debt?" And
yeah.
Had you let me return, my reformation had been sure, as my conduct the last 3 months at the university gave every reason to believe. So, if we believe Poe, this is all John Allen's fault. If we find somewhere in the middle, it still seems like John Allen kind of set him up for failure. It's like, yeah. So anyway, let's talk about a Poe story here. One of the great ones. This is about the decadence of a wealthy family, which has a curse sort of embedded inside of its prosperity. This is the fall of the House of Usher. So, Kevin, have you read The Fall of the House of Usher? Probably years ago, I imagine.
Yeah, in high school. But no, between all the reading I do for Art of Darkness and whatever else I squeeze in, I have not read The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah.
Is it like a novella or
no? It's not that long.
Story?
I mean, you'd be surprised to find that most of these Poe stories are like 10 pages long. In my memory, they're like bigger somehow.
Right.
Like,
well, because you're a child and it's
difficult
language. They give it to you because it's slightly more difficult and there's subtext.
I think that's true. Yeah, you've got to stretch a little bit to actually, when you're in like 8th grade or something.
13.
It's yeah. But so The Fall of the House of Usher is a classic. It's a classic, and some would say the best of the Poe stories. Let me just read you. And basically how it works is there's this family, the Ushers. They were once very wealthy. Like I said, there's somehow like a curse, not only in the house of the Usher, but in the Ushers themselves. They're terribly sensitive. And one of the Ushers, Roderick Usher, he's in fact the last of the male Ushers, calls upon the narrator to come attend upon him. And the narrator is a friend from way back who hasn't seen him in years, and it's kind of mysterious why he's even calling him to the house. Let me just read a little bit. And this is when the narrator arrives at the House of Usher. Quote, I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium. The bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. What was it, I paused to think, what was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? And he goes into this house, and there's clearly what's so effective about this story is the mood more than anything. There is this sense like that it's not clear exactly what's wrong, but it feels haunted. And Poe tells you it's sort of haunted, but there's this way in which he establishes a feeling that we see more. I think, for instance, Lovecraft would have taken a lot from this story. Hold on, I'm just trying to find a note here. Oh, can I not do that? Hold on.
I have to say, the title, The Fall of the House of Usher, is such a poetic, sonorous. It feels like a story that, like a Borgesian thing. If it didn't exist, somebody would have to create it.
Yeah. So now let me read you a part where he describes what's wrong with the Ushers. And again, I'm just trying to get you to get a sense of what is Poe doing? How does he write these things? And this is one of his most prominent and well-loved pieces. Quote, it was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit. That is, Roderick Usher spoke of the narrator's visit, of his earnest desire to see me and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and a family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. A mere nervous affection, he immediately added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although, perhaps, the terms and the general manner of their narration had their weight. He had suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. The most insipid food was alone endurable. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments, which did not inspire him with horror. Okay, so things that I like about this story, Poe is playing in the Gothic tradition of the late 1700s. It kind of predates him, right? Gothic fiction, and to put it simply, it's all about, grand buildings that have fallen into disuse, beautiful women with a haunted look. Roderick Usher has a sister who's has tuberculosis, but she's beautiful and striking, right? It's about ghosts. It's about murder. It's about passion, secrets, family lines. These are all the tropes of Gothic literature, and we still have Gothic stories now, right? That not just stories that are Gothic aesthetically based on a stormy night in an old mansion, but that follow the deeper trends of Gothic literature. Southern Gothic is clearly an example as a genre, but I remember seeing, did you ever see that show? I was on Netflix, Bloodlines. Sam Shepard was in it. He was
I may have seen one or two episodes of it, but I was aware that it was one of the last things Sam Shepard did.
Yeah. And Sam Shepard and Sissy Spacek are they're the elders of this family that run this hotel in Florida, whatever. But it's very modern. There's cell phones and, but it's clearly a Gothic story.
True Detective,
everything about
season 1.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Poe is playing in that tradition. And Gothic literature was extremely popular in the late 1700s.
Yeah, because it's kind of sexy, and it's kind of old world, and it's a little bit transgressive, and it'll perennially come back.
Oh yeah.
It's a vibe.
Yeah, well, and I think it also speaks to an aspect of everybody's life kind of has a Gothic aspect to it too, right? Because I think especially the ghost part, it's it's one of the genres that it was okay to put ghosts in for the longest time.
Sure. and now we're thinking about death and
and memory
and what do we really know about, not everybody's quite as heavily churched. People are sort of being a little more liberal, getting more education, and and also could be something rather tittillating about death too.
Oh yeah,
being scared. It's a bit of a that horror movie first date, that everybody talks about. Yeah, go to a horror movie.
Right. And also secrets. Family secrets. Every family's got one or two things that they don't really talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then nobody really has the whole full story, or the person who doesn't actually never tells it, that kind of thing.
Just like we have the incident on the pod that we would never talk about.
Yeah, of course. The incident. Don't even allude to it. One thing I like about there's a couple of things that I like about this story too. One is that Poe does this really cool thing where so the narrator spends all this time like reading books with Roderick Usher, and they like paint pictures. He's just like keeping him company basically. And meanwhile, the sister is sort of dying. And there is this moment where the story that they're reading, the things that are happening in the story start to seem like they're causing things in the house to happen. It's a really cool move. Like there's some kind of sound in the story he's reading. So there's a story within the story. And then that sound breaks out into what actually happens within the House of Usher. There's this cool sort of like meta thing happening. There's also some typical Poe traits, right? As I mentioned, the Usher sister is dying, I think, of tuberculosis, and they thinking that she's dead, Roderick buries her in the family tomb down in the basement, but she comes to life, right? It's like a very Poe move, not only to bury somebody down in the tomb, but to like have them come back to life. So it's sort of like the archetypal, if you want like all of the Poe elements to show up in one place, or as many of them as possible, you do it in the House of Usher, and the fall of the House of Usher. Okay, so what does Poe do after leaving the University of Virginia? He tries to live at home with John Allan for a while, but this just does not work at all. And he finds himself adrift. In April of 1827, he lands absolutely penniless in Boston, the city of his birth, and a city which he despised. For a while, he works as a clerk. Go
ahead. How do you like them apples? Yeah. Beantown. Hack the card, have it, yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I wonder if that was what the Boston accent was like in 1827.
Yeah, boy, I would love to listen to some scholar or some expert of accents do a Boston accent circa 1827.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. Yeah. Poe works as a clerk at a warehouse for a while. Then he works for a small newspaper. Finally, he enlists in the army under the name Edgar A. Perry. He's only 18 years old, but he gives his age as 22. Not long after he enlists,
I'm 22. I'm 22 in drinking years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He's probably looking a little rough. Yeah. Hadn't had a good meal in a couple weeks. Had been drinking and gambling. Yeah. In July of 1827, Poe puts out his first collection of poems.
Oh, Christ.
I had to do it one time.
Shouldn't take the Lord's name in vain, but
I had to do it one time.
Oh, oof.
Yeah.
Some people say poems. In this case, Poe is writing poems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
pain.
He manages to put this out through he self-publishes it, and he takes donations from friends. Mostly these were fellow soldiers that he was enlisted with. And the funny thing is, apparently he would tell like ribald little like limericks and like little rhymey, dirty joke kind of things, hanging out with the boys as you do. And apparently the other soldiers thought that when he said, I'm taking up a collection to put out this poetry, they thought it was going to be that. They thought it was going to be like bawdy, humorous, like Poe telling.
He's going to put his little Poe shit talk kind of,
Right.
No,
it'd be clever and funny, and it was not that at all. It was called Tamerlane and Other Poems. The title poem is Tamerlane, and for people who don't know who Tamerlane was, he was the last of the great nomadic conquerors of the Eurasian steppe. I think 14th century, maybe 15th century. He was a brilliant military strategist who founded his empire stretched from Afghanistan to Iran to Central Asia, also known as a great patron of the arts. This poem was inspired by Thomas Coleridge's Kubla Khan poem, the great Kubla Khan poem of 1797. Who can blame somebody for taking a page from Kubla Khan?
There isn't a single dick joke in this fucking tome.
Yeah.
This poem.
Where's Eddie?
What is this?
Where's Eddie? I want my nickel back.
Yeah, Eddie. Yeah.
Let me read you just a taste of Tamerlane. It's kind of long. I'm not going to read much of it, but I just want you to. What does a 18-year-old Poe? What does his poetry sound like?
Yeah, fascinating.
Tamerlane. Kind solace in a dying hour. Such, Father, is not now my theme. I will not madly deem that power of earth may shrive me of the sin unearthly pride that reveled in. I have no time to dote or dream. You call it hope, that fire of fire. It is but agony of desire.
You see this thing that Poe sent around, Gary? What the hell is this buggery? What is this? I
knew that boy wasn't right. That boy wouldn't write.
I thought you say I'm going to deliver a book of poems. I think you're being funny.
Right.
This isn't funny. There's nothing funny about this. Also, it lacks the structural integrity and the metaphoric lift of Coleridge.
Well, yes, yeah, Gary.
Yeah, Gary.
Yeah. So his poetry. We'll talk a little bit about his poetry. I mean, there would be people who knew him more as a poet, even in his writing career, than as anything else. His poetry, most of it, I'm going to be honest, doesn't do a ton for me personally. But I think it's worth looking at because it's kind of how he starts as a writer. Let's read a little bit from a poem called, I think it's The Conqueror Worm. Is it Conqueror Worm or The Conqueror Worm? And
I remember that as a title. Yeah, that's a banger title.
Yeah. So I'll just read this whole thing because it's relatively short as far as Poe's poems go.
Well, you do. I'm just going to stand up. I'm going to refill my water. I am listening. You, our listeners, are listening to Art of Darkness. You know that. This is the Poe episode. Brad is getting it in. You're going to read The Conqueror Worm.
Yes.
You know where to find us. Yeah. Artofdarkpod.com. I'm really enjoying myself, Brad. This is fun. I knew Poe was going to be interesting, but I'm riveted. All right.
Awesome.
Bring it on.
Excellent. The Conqueror Worm. Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years, an angel throng, bewinged, bedight, in veils and drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they, who come and go. At bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible, woe. That motley drama, oh be sure, it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth into the selfsame spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see amid the mimic rout a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes, with mortal pangs the mimes become its food, and the angels sob at vermin fangs, in human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, and the angels all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. Okay. Now, let me read. Well, we'll go. I think I was going to read another poem that was a little bit longer, but I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about this piece that Poe wrote. It's sort of an aesthetic statement. It's not a manifesto per se, but it's an essay he wrote fairly late in life called The Poetic Principle. Now, I'm just going to give you... it's sort of his rules for what makes a good poem, and what is valuable about poetry. And
I am back with my soda water, and the Conqueror Worm. That's a banger.
It's a good poem. That's a good poem.
That's a good poem. That's an all-time good poem.
Yeah. It's dark and it's heavy and it has twists and turns you don't see coming, and like you don't expect it to be about an actual worm, sort of, right? Like you think it's going to be all metaphorical or something, but it's not. It's good. I quite like it.
Did I hear the word manifesto?
Not quite a manifesto, but it is a statement he made of several pages long, with which I'm going to read the opening para or two, called The Poetic Principle. And this is where he basically, once Poe got somewhat established, and we're getting there, he becomes very pretentious, right? It's like, oh, well, I will tell everyone what the principle of poetry is. Quote, in speaking of the poetic principle, I have no design to either be thorough or profound. While discussing very much at random the essentiality, that's a good word, of what we call poetry, my principal purpose will be to cite for consideration some few of those minor English or American poems which best suit my own taste, or which, upon my own fancy, have left the most definite impression. By, quote, minor poems, I mean, of course, poems of little length. And here, in the beginning, permit me to say a few words in regard to a somewhat peculiar principle which, whether rightfully or wrongfully, has always had its influence in my own critical estimate of the poem. I hold that a long poem does not exist. I maintain that the phrase "a long poem" is simply a flat contradiction in terms. I need scarcely observe that a poem... skipping down. There are no doubt many who have found difficulty in reconciling the critical dictum that Paradise Lost, John Milton episode, folks. If you haven't checked that out. Paradise Lost is to be devoutly admired throughout, with the absolute impossibility of maintaining for it during perusal the amount of enthusiasm which that critical dictum would demand. So he's basically saying, like, what a poem is trying to accomplish, you can't make it hundreds of pages long. Like, it fundamentally, you're trying to create an acute emotional sensation, and you literally can't do that over the course of hundreds of pages. So he calls Paradise Lost a sequence of poems. If you were to take each book or each section as its own poem, then okay, that's a poem, that's a poem, that's a poem, and they all line up and they link together.
It's a pretty bold statement for a fellow who has yet to write anything like the quality of Paradise Lost, or much like the great comedy from Dante.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't say anything about Dante, but he would throw, I mean, that would fit in what he's saying here as well. In regard to the Iliad, we have, if not positive proof, at least very good reason for believing it intended as a series of lyrics. But granting the epic intention, I can say only that the work is based in an imperfect sense of art. The modern epic is of the supposititious ancient model, but an inconsiderate and blindfold imitation. But the day of these artistic anomalies is over. If at any time any very long poem were popular in reality, which I doubt, it is at least clear that no very long poem will ever be popular again. One more little bit from this. On the other hand, it is clear that a poem may be improperly brief. Undue brevity degenerates into mere epigrammatism. A very short poem, while now and then producing a brilliant or vivid, never produces a profound or enduring effect. There must be the steady pressing down of the stamp upon the wax. I really like that analogy, that a poem has to have the steady pressing down of the stamp upon the wax. You have to make the feeling happen. Poe did not care for allegory, though he sometimes delved into allegory. He thought that stories were meant to, in a fairly modern sense, were meant to entertain and to engender a feeling. They were supposed to make you feel a certain way. And so he often was at odds with other writers of his day who were sort of thought more that literature was
cerebral, high-minded. It sort of it should elevate the rational faculties and make us more reasonable creatures. Maybe spark empathy, but we don't want to get carried away, do we?
Right.
And I'll tell you that there are way more of those people now who think they're more like Poe. Right. But they're way more doing the other thing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Oh, they don't want to be wayward, Brad. We all have to have careers here at the end of the day.
Right.
If you wear the wrong thing to your book coming out, the coverage is going to be scathing, Brad.
Right.
What are we going to wear to next year's Art of Darkness Live in Detroit, Brad? We have to begin planning. Well, surely designer.
I was just going to wear this. I don't know.
Oh shit! Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably wash this first.
Yeah.
I could grow my beard back. So I can I gotta get my beard back so I can put a little bird in it for Art of Darkness Live. We've been preparing this episode all month. The bird is nested in Kevin's beard. Now we're going to be doing. Have we announced who we're going to do for the live show?
I don't think we
year?
have. Maybe
let's announce it right now.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, let's announce it right now. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we've done one Art of Darkness Live so far.
Yeah.
F. Scott Fitzgerald here in beautiful St. Paul, Minnesota.
So much fun.
Next year, date TBD because I'm expecting another child. There you go. Whoop, party. Okay. So at a certain point that will happen. My life will become just that much crazier. And obviously, please pray for us if you're of that disposition, or send us some thinky thunks and thoughts. But around that blessed event, assuming everything goes well, and of course it will. Brad and I are going to do an Art of Darkness Live episode where, Brad?
In Detroit, Michigan. Sunny Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, Michigan, the Paris of America.
Yeah.
And who are we going to do when we do Art of Darkness Live in Michigan 2024?
After much consternation, we've decided that we are going to cover the great Robin Williams.
Robin Williams. Why? Because what's the Detroit connection?
He spent a number of years as a teenager in Detroit in a famous school that's right up the road here. So, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so you have that to look forward to in 2024. If you're in or around Detroit, you'll be able to drive down the road. The rest of you can come and visit and join us, and we'll do the live show. And maybe I'll have a bird in my beard. Maybe I won't. It's going to be, but I'm really excited for that, Brad. And we're going to have to talk more on a back channel and make plans.
Yeah, there's some planning to do, but it's happening.
Boy, aren't you glad that you're listening to this episode now, folks? Now you know where the live show is going to be next year, right here in the middle of this Poe episode. I'm excited. This is going to be fun. Doing it live was a lot of fun. Too.
It was. Yeah, it was a different. I mean, it's a whole different animal than how we do this. I mean, I just pretend that I'm talking to you.
Right. I'm increasingly conscious that there's an audience on the other side of this. Maybe that's a problem. I don't know. I don't think so. If you're listening to this, though, we do appreciate it. Hopefully you're enjoying this episode. And if you're in the area, of Detroit when we drop that, definitely please come out. We're going to make it a fun time. All right, Brad, where were we in the Poe trajectory?
Poe is in the Army. He enlisted just as a private or whatever, the lowest rank you can walk in the door as. While in the Army, he got a promotion first to artificer, in which he apparently prepared artillery shells. He gets to the point where he's making something like $300 or $400 a month, which isn't, and that's in today's dollars. Sorry, so not great.
In today's dollars, he's making that. Oof. Yeah.
But they're feeding you and they're
he's in the Army. He's got 3 hots and a cot or whatever they say. But
but still not a ton of money. By 1829, he would be promoted to regimental sergeant major, which is the highest rank an enlisted man could acquire. Maybe even still, certainly at the time. He reconnected to his foster father somewhat. Remember, he basically bailed out of the house and disappeared and enlisted in the Army under another name, right? But he's kind of reconnected with his foster father to a certain extent, John Allen. I'm going to read you a little bit of this letter he wrote to him. Let's see. Is that right? Yeah. Let's see. Thinking of his recently published volume of poetry, Poe begged his father not to, quote, throw me aside as degraded. I will be an honor to your name. Now, this time, instead of meaningless threats, Poe bade Allan a theatrical adieu, and like the hero of a melodrama, claimed that Allan's rejection would inspire his quest for success. And this is part of the letter here. Quote, if you determine to abandon me, here take I my farewell. Neglected, I will be doubly ambitious, and the world shall hear of the son whom you have thought unworthy of your notice. 10 days later, on January 1st, 1829, Poe, having shot up in only 19 months to the highest rank an enlisted man could attain, right? So he's really trying to make a go of it in the Army. He wants this to succeed. He's feeling ambitious.
This is a turn I did not see coming. I did not see Poe thriving as a military figure. Right, so very interesting. Okay, he's pulling himself together.
Yes. Now, but we're up for a fairly quick turn. He eventually, after about 2 years, wants out. He's not really fit for the military. He's managed to kind of like stomach it and push through, but he's a poet. He's a scholar. He's a writer. The Army's not exactly the place for him. And unfortunately, he'd also like hit the ceiling on how far he could go with it too. He'd sort of gotten promoted as far as he get promoted, and he's like, now what? I'm made for greater things than this.
I've been on Rogan.
Right.
My books aren't selling anymore. Probably the only thing that's going to help me is some sort of a serious addiction and rehab somewhere like Siberia.
Right.
That'll help my career.
Right.
Yeah, he's got nowhere to go.
Yeah. Now, the sort of final straw of this is when his foster mother, Frances Allan, dies in early 1829. He has a brief reconciliation with his father sort of around that, right? I mean, it's his foster father's wife, and she's died. And so, of course, that kind of brings them together a little bit. And Poe finally, in this time, manages to convince his foster father to write a letter getting him out of the Army. He needs a letter from his father to get out of the Army. I don't know what the rules are now to get out of the Army, but apparently this is what he had to do. He also had to pay for his own substitute. So he had to find somebody to replace him in his regiment and pay for that person to take that spot.
That's wild because we have the same clause on this podcast. If either one of us wants to take a break, we have to find our substitute.
Right.
I'm currently training an AI.
No, I am. I am too. Wait,
yeah, I'm training. The AI is gonna make mediocre jokes. It's gonna, but it has to have a comprehensive knowledge of the University of Minnesota. His AI is gonna be wild, man. You aren't even gonna notice. I'm just gonna slip him in. Yeah. It's gonna be like one of these doppelgangers from a Poe story.
Yeah, for people watching on YouTube, you'll know Kevin's been AI this entire episode already.
This entire time.
Since day one. Yeah. Just kidding. So he gets out of the Army. Now he moves to Baltimore and he lives with a cousin and he looks for work. 1829, he basically republishes, but with some additional poems, a 250 copy edition of Tamerlane and Other Poems. Now, modest beginnings, but here's something to sort of chew on. He puts this book out. I could be wrong, but I think he put this book out himself. I think this is another self-published deal. Not too many years ago at auction, the last surviving copy of this book fetched the highest price ever paid for a book by an American.
What was it?
I don't remember actually. Maybe look.
I'll look it up.
I must have missed it. Yeah, Tamerlane and Other Poems, Poe, auction price. So just self-published. I mean, impressive. I mean, he does this in college as an army grunt. Nobody's paying any attention to it. How much was it?
In December of 2009, a fairly worn original copy of Tamerlane and Other Poems sold at Christie's auction house in New York for a whopping $662,500.
Yeah.
That established a record. Previous to this record setter, the last known copy to have sold at auction fetched $250,000.
Yeah.
So, whoa, doggy. You too can self-publish poems that alienate you from your drinking buddies. And later, someone will get a healthy commission on that.
Yeah. Someone else will sell it for more money than you made in your entire life combined.
Yeah. You Yep. Hey, he was the literary it girl of New York City for a minute, Brad.
Yeah,
even as a ghost, as a spooky, haunting literary it girl. Just fabulous. Hovering over Christie's auction house. Muttering, if only I could have seen some of that money in my lifetime, I too could have thrown fabulous parties.
Okay. He's in Baltimore. He's basically extracted himself from the army. He's got a book of poems out there that nobody has read. What does he do next? What is he going to do? He can't seem to make scratch in Baltimore. He decides he's going to go to West Point. Now,
become an officer.
Yeah, I think what happened is, and he never says this anywhere, but I think what happened is he got bored of the army. He leaves, or just didn't like the army, whatever. He leaves. He goes in Baltimore for a while, can't make a go of it. And then he decides, well, he's like, hey, I was actually pretty good at the army thing. Like, maybe what I just need to do, I need to level up, right? What's the next? Okay, if you go to West Point, then I'll be an officer. Maybe I can, I think he saw it as like a fallback plan into something he can make a living at. Yeah.
Well, and he shows up in the Christian Bale movie.
Yes, he does.
The Pale Blue Eye.
Yes.
And so I knew this. I knew that he was at West Point, but
yeah. And the premise of the Pale Blue Eye is that there is a murder or series of murders on the West Point campus. Christian Bale is a sort of like drunken detective kind of guy who shows up, and Poe helps him solve the crime. Which we'll get to why some other reasons why that's interesting from a sort of literary history standpoint a little bit later. So he gets into West Point, gets some help from his father. Remember, his father is perhaps the wealthiest man in Virginia, so that doesn't hurt. And he gets to West Point in the year 1830, just 1 year after the graduation of Robert E. Lee. You know what I thought was interesting? West Point's been around forever. Apparently, Poe is like the only writer to come out of West Point. There's like no other. I mean, I'm sure there's people who've written like autobiographies and stuff, but like that's it. He's the only one.
I mean, that's not really what that school is designed to produce.
It's not. Yeah. But it does attract a lot of brain power.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It's a very prestigious institution.
It really is.
Yeah, and also an absolutely beautiful part of the country. Yeah.
I mean, I've never been there specifically, but I'm sort of familiar with.
Yeah, the Hudson Valley is just an incredible region. Yeah,
yeah. So let's see. Okay, here's a bit from the Myers biography about West Point. Quote: Poe was distinctly ill-suited to the rigors of life at West Point. In order to develop Spartan character and discipline in the cadets, the academy required attendance at church, minute regulation of daily life, cold rooms in winter and hot ones in summer, inferior food, and no recreation. Thayer and his successors prescribed harmless as well as pernicious pursuits, forbidding the cadets to drink, play cards or chess, gamble, use or possess tobacco, keep any cooking utensils in their room, participate in any games, read novels, romances, or plays, go off the post, bathe in the river, or play any musical instruments. Unlike the University of Virginia, which encouraged Poe's tendency to gamble and drink, the academy imposed intolerable discipline and severe punishments for any breach of the rules. Now, he did fairly well in the academic portion, at least. He was third in his class of 87 in the subject of French, and he was 13th in math. So he's always a good student. He's a smart guy. There's just like no way of getting around it. Here is a bit about an observation about Poe at the time. Alan Magruder, a classmate from Virginia who left the academy in 1831, mentioned the intellectual ability that enabled Poe to excel without effort. But he also stressed the lack of interest in routine military duties, which he had mastered during his 2 years in the Army. Alan Magruder says, quote, Poe was very shy and reserved in his intercourse with his fellow cadets, his associates being confined almost exclusively to Virginians. He was an accomplished French scholar and had a wonderful aptitude for mathematics, so that he had no difficulty in preparing his recitations in his class and obtaining the highest marks in these departments. He was a devourer of books, but his great fault was his neglect of and apparent contempt for military duties. His wayward and capricious temper made him at times utterly oblivious or indifferent to the ordinary routine of roll call, drills, and guard duties. These habits subjected him often to arrest and punishment and effectively prevented his learning or discharging the duties of a soldier.
It'd be real tough at West Point if you're like, nah, I ain't gonna do that.
Nah, it's not for me, man.
I don't feel like guard duty.
Yeah, I don't really. It's not how I roll.
Let's
go over here. Go over here.
That works real well.
Right. Now, so ultimately, Poe decides that it is in fact time to get out. Now, he had to ask his foster father, for help doing this. Now, remember, he goes in the Army, writes up his foster father a little while later, says, Dad, I want out of this. Can you get me out of this? Okay, he does. Goes to Baltimore and kind of doesn't really know what he's doing for a while. Then he asks his foster father, can you help me get into West Point? Foster father does it. Year or so later, can you help me get out of West Point? It's like, no, dude, you're on your, like, you got to stick to something, bro. Like, you can't just, and at this point, I sympathize with his foster father. Like, no.
Yeah. You're in major gambling debts.
Right.
Your self-publishing poems. Oh my God.
Right. Yeah. So okay. So how does Poe does get out though? And this is how he does it. He simply stops doing it. He doesn't show up to drills. He doesn't carry out the duties he's supposed to carry out. He stops going to class. He's still on campus living in his room. He just doesn't do anything.
Whoa.
And then he gets intentionally to get himself court-martialed. And because he knew that court-martial didn't mean you'd get expelled, he pled not guilty to the charges, right? Because that amplifies the punishment. They're like, we'll just get rid of this. We got to just get rid of this guy. So, February of 1831, he is court-martialed and summarily dismissed from West Point. Now, and also in this process, he and his foster father, John Allen, they're basically done. Like, any idea that he was going to get the inheritance, any idea that they were going to come to friendly terms as he grew in adulthood, it's over.
Well, it's reaching a point now too where you're embarrassing him.
Yeah, he's a prominent. He's one of the wealthiest men in the state, and his son just brought up on charges at West Point for failure to do anything at all. And then pled not guilty like a jackass, right? Like, not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you can see why his foster father's a little miffed at him. Now, after West Point, there's actually a few years that are fairly obscure, and there's not that much that is known about what he was up to. He's desperately poor is about the only thing that we know for sure. These are the neat years. Yeah, the neat years. This is when he was. Yeah, this is when he was especially wayward. One thing. So this is where he reconnects with some family. This is his father's widowed sister, this woman, Maria Clem, and Maria Clem's daughter, Virginia Clem. He hooks up with them somehow in I think in Philadelphia. I believe it's Philadelphia. They live together. The three of them live in one house together for a while off of a soldier's pension. This is actually General Poe's pension, the old grandfather Poe, the last remaining bits of it. And they live off the sewing that Maria Clem can bring in. Poe would eventually come to refer to Maria Clem, his aunt, as mother. He would even write a sonnet to her called To My Mother in later years. And they really stuck by each other. Maria and Poe, his aunt, they stuck by each other till he died. Right. When he could, he took care of her. And when he couldn't, she took care of him. It's kind of lovely.
Yeah, it is lovely. I'm glad that this has happened because it was starting to look pretty gnarly for our hero here.
Yeah. Oh, it still gets pretty gnarly, but like this is like a life raft kind of. He also comes back in, this would be in the early 1830s. He comes back into semi-regular contact with his brother, who had been raised by General Poe when Poe's parents died. But sadly, this is a kind of a crazy story. Not long after they reconnect, this is Henry Poe. Henry drinks himself to death. He's like 24 years old and he drinks himself to death, possibly with a touch of tuberculosis along with it. This leaves Poe and his erratic, delusional sister down in Richmond, Virginia, as the only Poes. And I don't think either of them had children. Well, I know Edgar didn't, but I don't think Rosalie had children. Now, Poe, of course, has been writing through this time. And in 1832, he gets his first publication that's other than his Tamerlane and his poem and other poems. This is a short story called Metzengerstein, Gothic supernatural horror in the vein of E.T.A. Hoffman. It, quote, depicts pathological emotional states, subconscious criminal impulses, and a poetic atmosphere that combined realistic and supernatural worlds. It's very Gothic. It's kind of a masterful piece of Gothic literature. I don't think it's earth-shattering in any particular way. It does involve a haunted horse, which is pretty cool. It's a nice little story. Maybe not where I'd start if I hadn't read any Poe before.
The full title is Metzengerstein, A Tale in Imitation of the German.
Yeah, the German is E.T.A. Hoffman, is the writer E.T.A. Hoffman.
I see.
Him as the German. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Metzengerstein.
Metzengerstein.
Yeah, it's getting so much better, Brad.
Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah. Yes, it is. 1833, Poe enters 6 stories into a contest in the Baltimore Saturday Visitor. This story, MS in a Bottle, manuscript in a bottle, won the $50 prize, and I think that's like around $1,500 in today's money.
That's not too bad.
That's a good prize. That's a good prize.
That's a nice little. No writer is going to turn that down, right. Even now. Yeah. And the prestige that comes with that.
Yeah.
We say this on the pod, but I'm going to say it again for anybody who's listening who is of means, who bought Doge early, or whatever. If anybody who actually loves their children, you're really though you could do so much for the arts and letters by just endowing like a $5,000 annual prize with your name on it that gives some sort of prestige. The real challenge is administrative. Like, how do you actually take submissions, manage submissions, who chooses? It's all that stuff. But if you're a motivated person and you want to support the arts, the very best thing you can do is don't send your money to a university. Don't send your money to an arts institution unless you vet that institution to find out how much money they put in the hands of artists directly.
Right.
But direct material support for artists. That's where it's right. I think that's the future, frankly. But that's a bit of an aside. But I'm glad that he won an award. Did he win it for which story?
It's called MS in a Bottle.
Okay, manuscript in a bottle.
Manuscript in a bottle. It's quite good. It's got seafaring element. He's already doing these sort of supernatural, psychological thrill. It's good. I would actually recommend this as in his sort of upper quartile of
and these are stories he's writing like in his Philadelphia days.
Yes. Yeah. 1833. Yeah, I believe he's still in Philadelphia now. He moves around so much, it's a little hard to keep track of, but I'm pretty sure he's in Philadelphia at the time. Though this isn't a Baltimore newspaper. So he might actually be in Baltimore by this point. Whatever the case, he's gonna bounce around. He submitted poems in this as well, and this is where we get the very contentious Poe. He submits some poems which did not win. He takes this part of it personally, the fact that his poems didn't win, especially when he finds out that the newspaper's editor had won under a pseudonym.
Oh, damn, scandalous!
Yeah, Poe confronts the man in the street. This guy is named John Hewitt. And let me just read you this little anecdote about what happens when he confronts him in the street. Poe is Poe is temperamental. Poe's quote, Poe's aggressive behavior on the streets of Baltimore. So he was living in Baltimore at the time. When he encountered John Hewitt, the editor of the Saturday Visitor, who had submitted his own poem under a pseudonym and won the prize, showed his deep resentment about the matter and provoked a physical assault. According to Hewitt, Poe approached him with an ominous scowl and sternly said, "You have used underhanded means, sir, to obtain that prize over me." "I deny it, sir," was my reply. "Then why did you keep back your real name?" "I had my reasons, and you have no right to question me. But you have tampered with the committee, sir." "The committee are gentlemen above being tampered with, sir." "I agree that the committee are gentlemen," replied he, his dark eyes flashing with anger, "but I cannot place you in that category." My blood mounted up to fever heat in a moment, and with my usual impulsiveness, I dealt him a blow which staggered him, for I was physically his superior.
Become Wayward. I love this, dude. Yeah. I love somebody who takes this seriously.
Yeah. Well, he felt like he'd gotten cheated, and there are times to stand up for yourself, that's being cheated's one of them, right? Now he starts to make in this era, his first couple publications, he starts to make some literary friends. One of the judges of the contests he wins is this prominent lawyer named John Pendleton Kennedy, which I don't know if it's any relation to the Kennedy family. It may or may not. And this guy becomes something of a patron for a little while. Let me read a little bit about this, because you remember Poe is desperately poor at this time. This is from John Pendleton Kennedy. Quote, "I have never known nor heard of anyone," and he's talking about Poe, "whose life so curiously illustrated that twofold existence of the spiritual and the carnal disputing the control of the man, which has often made the theme of fiction. He was debauched by the most groveling appetites and exalted by the richest conceptions of genius." And let me give you a bit about this is from another guy that ran the contest, this guy John Latrobe, talking about Poe, because I want to give you, he's like an adult now, right? Up until now,
I'm reading about this Pendleton Kennedy, and it doesn't appear that he's related to the other obvious, but just at a glance, if anybody knows different, just another Kennedy, another famous John Kennedy. I mean, this guy has a serious Wikipedia page.
Does he really?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Here's from another contest judge, John Latrobe, talking about Poe. I like this because it gives you a picture of we get a good image of Poe, what he looked like, what he seemed like. Quote, "He was, if anything, below the middle size and yet could not be described as a small man. His figure was remarkably good, and he carried himself erect and well, as one who had been trained to it. He was dressed in black, and his frock coat was buttoned to the throat, where it met the black stock, then almost universally worn. Not a particle of white was visible. Coat, hat, boots, and gloves had very evidently seen their best days, but so far as mending and brushing go, everything had been done, apparently, to make them presentable. On most men, his clothes would have looked shabby and seedy, but there was something about this man that prevented one from criticizing his garments. The impression made, however, was that the award in Mr. Poe's favor was not inopportune. The prize, they were like, oh, he probably really needed that. This is what everybody said about Poe. He would dress very well, and his clothes would be good clothes and clean, but shabby. He's like wearing the same thing. It's a very nice outfit that he presses and cleans, but he wears it every day for months on end.
And just to be clear, grunge had not happened yet.
Right. Yes, exactly.
This wasn't a look you could pull off. There was a time where people would judge you by how how many clothes were tailored. I mean,
yeah. Now, the biggest thing that this Kennedy fellow ends up doing was to hook Poe up with a gig working for a gentleman named Thomas Willis White at the Southern Literary Messenger, based in Richmond, Virginia, which is where Poe is from. Poe was born in Boston, but his childhood is overseas and in Richmond, Virginia. For this job, he's doing basically every task imaginable for the most money he's ever made, which still is something like $400 a week in today's dollars. It's still not very much money, even though it's the most money he's ever made. This is this is 1835 where this is going on. He gets this job, the Southern Literary Messenger. Now he starts here we get the first instantiation of a cycle that happens several times for Poe. He gets an editing job. He's actually really, really good at it. His boss thinks he's talented. He's making big contributions, including actual pieces of his own writing. But like every other one, he's underpaid. He eventually becomes difficult to deal with. He becomes erratic, and one might say even wayward.
Okay, our favorite word here. Yeah, we got it.